the other things like foreign tensions, domestic tensions, are going to have an impact, Levin added. TPM, which stands for Talking Points Memo, which is a website, reported this article and finalized it for publication on the Friday before the El Paso shooting occurred. Though the suspect's manifesto invokes language that Trump has used, calling the massacre, quote, a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas, the shooter did not invoke Trump himself. Below is a sample of cases in which the suspect appeared to be inspired by Trump. Boston brothers Scott and Stephen Leader allegedly beat up and urinated on a homeless man of Hispanic descent because they thought he was an undocumented immigrant. Scott Leader reportedly told police that he was inspired by Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. In August 2015, two brothers in Boston allegedly, that's just repeating itself. After their arrest, they reportedly told police that Donald Trump was right and that all these illegals need to be deported. Trump did not immediately disavow the attack, calling it a shame, before adding that, quote, the people that are following me are very passionate. They love this country, end quote. Or, as the victim of the brothers put it to a sentencing judge in 2015, I actually became a permanent resident of this country years ago, although if I had been undocumented, I still would not have deserved to be beaten in this way, end quote. Penn State student Nick Davella attacked a person of South Asian descent in December 2015, grabbing his victim by the throat and threatening to put a bullet in him. In an argument for leniency at sentencing, Davella's attorney argued that he had acted out of, quote, a love of country and not hatred, telling the judge that Donald Trump is running for president of the United States, saying that we've got to check people out more closely. Davella was sentenced to a maximum 2 years incarceration for ethnic intimidation in November 2016. Moving on, Daniel Roe attacked an interracial couple in August 2016 after seeing the pair kiss. An African-American man suffered a stab wound to the abdomen in the attack. During his arrest, Roe reportedly confessed to officers that he stabbed the couple, saying, I'm a white supremacist, before saying he wanted to go to the next Donald Trump rally and stomp out Black Lives Matter protesters. Frank Nussera, the police chief of New Jersey's Bordertown Township, was indicted on federal criminal charges in November 2017 for allegedly committing a hate crime after he slammed a handcuffed African-American suspect's head into a metal door frame. After the assault, which occurred in September 2016, Nussera was recorded as saying that Donald Trump is the last hope for white people. Nussera is reportedly fighting the charges to trial. In October 2016, the run-up to the presidential election, the FBI charged 3 Kansas men with attempting to bomb apartment buildings housing Somali immigrants. The plotters allegedly intended for the attack to scare non-white immigrants out of the country. In that case, the plot was scheduled for 1 day after the 2016 election in order to protect the interests of a candidate that the DOJ did not identify. Researchers found that one of the plotters saw it in these terms. Patrick Stein posted frequently about supporting Trump. According to federal prosecutors, the point of the thwarted attack was to make a lot more people in this country wake up and smell the coffee and decide that they want this country back. During sentencing in October 2018, the 3 argued for leniency by blaming Trump for heightening the rhetorical stakes for people of all political persuasions. To continue, James Alex Fields Jr., the neo-Nazi Charlottesville murderer, reportedly began to contain previously outspoken Nazi views during the 2016 election season. The AP cited a teacher of Fields as saying that he was a big Trump supporter because of what he believed to be Trump's views on race, and that the president's proposal to build a border wall with Mexico was particularly appealing. Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz was part of a private Instagram group where he reportedly bragged about writing a letter to President Donald Trump and receiving a response, and also espoused bigoted views. Cruz had a picture of himself in a MAGA hat, Make America Great Again, on his Instagram profile, but the Miami Herald reported a far more macabre detail. After his pro-gun control mother passed away, Cruz put a MAGA hat in her casket and took a picture. Due to the fact that his mother hated Donald Trump, he put it in her casket with her when she died and took a picture of her with the hat. A police report cited by the Herald quoted a friend of Cruz's as saying, Cesar Sayoc pleaded guilty to several felony charges after he mailed bombs to prominent liberals around the country ahead of the 2018 midterm elections. In an argument for leniency at sentencing, Sayoc's defense attorneys portrayed him in a July 2019 court filing as a pariah that found meaning in Donald Trump. When Trump's rhetoric went from being that of self-help books to political and violent in 2015 and 2016, Sayoc supposedly followed suit. That culminated in the South Florida resident mailing pipe bombs to 13 prominent liberals around the country, supposedly out of a belief that he was protecting Trump. We're going on. We're still yet more. Okay. Brenton, not Brendan. Brenton. I can't read. Tarrant, the man accused of killing 51 people at a New Zealand mosque, cited Trump in his manifesto, which included a questionnaire addressed to himself that he released just before allegedly committing the March 2019 massacre. Quote, Are you a supporter of Donald Trump? The questionnaire asked. Quote, as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose? Sure, the document reads. As a policymaker and leader? Dear God, no. Well, I agree with that. Latter part. Okay. Anthony Cornello, the 24-year-old who allegedly killed a mob boss, thought President Trump supported his plan to commit the murder, according to an argument from his defense attorney. Cornello was a firm believer in the QAnon conspiracy theory and was supposedly motivated to kill out of a duty to Trump and the theory. Because of his self-perceived status in QAnon, Mr. Cornello became certain that he was enjoying the protection of President Trump himself and that he had the president's full support. Cornello's attorney wrote in a court filing noting an attempt to preserve evidence of mental defect. Cornello allegedly shot Gambino crime family boss Francesco Frankie Boy Cali in March 2019. Cornello was obsessed with Fox News, frequently posting about the network. 4 upstate New York teens were arrested in January 2019 for allegedly planning to bomb a Muslim community in the state. The plot was discovered after a 16-year-old member of the group walked up to a table of classmates at lunch and showed them a picture of a fellow plotter asking, "He looks like a school shooter, doesn't he?" That was smart. One of those alleged to be involved, Vincent Vetromile, posted in support of Trump and his anti-Muslim rhetoric on social media before the attack, including inviting the president to his Eagle Scout ceremony. Scott Brian Haven made escalating death threats to members of Congress, demanding that they stop hindering the president. Utah resident Scott Brian Haven allegedly called the Capitol more than 2,000 times over the past 3 years, screaming about Democrats who were supposedly threatening Trump's presidency before his June 2019 arrest. Federal prosecutors cite one call in May 2019 where Haven said he was about to shoot an unnamed member of Congress in the head because the Russians want him taken out because he is trying to remove a duly elected president. In another March 2019 call to an unspecified senatorial office, Haven said he would use his Second Amendment right, there I go again, amendment right against the next Democrat leadership member who compared Trump to Hitler. So, I suppose it doesn't need to be said that, of course, there are people, disturbed people everywhere, who pick on celebrities as their, ideal or their motivation or their whatever. But this is a lot. It's a lot to look at. And these are all people that have specifically mentioned. That's not counting the El Paso guy who seems to have written his manifesto in order to avoid mentioning Trump in a certain way. But he certainly hits on a lot of the same themes and points. Anyway, these are things to be aware of. And again, it's not just Trump. He makes himself the leader. He puts himself in front. He's the cheerleader. He's the figurehead. He's all sorts of things. But it is the people, the hundreds, the thousands, maybe even millions of people that feel this way, similarly to this, that are creating the problem. And, this is all, I haven't mentioned immigration much, but this is all directly related to immigration, fear of immigrants. We've taken a situation where immigrants are coming here for a variety of reasons. Many have been here for years and years and years, and suddenly they're all seen as invaders who are infesting. All of this comes from the rhetoric that is being produced by these people, this administration, and being consumed by lots and lots of people who are ready to believe that for whatever reason, ready to swallow that hook, line, and sinker and feel right about it. And all the people in between who are just like, well, I don't know. I mean, who are refusing to say, okay, this is bad. This is wrong. This is all being made up. Let's reset. Let's get rid of all these guys. Let's start from scratch. Let's take a look at where we are and what's going on and see what's actually happening and stop believing the nonsense that we're being told. And there are a lot of those people. There are a lot of the bad ones out there, for sure, who are ready to eat this stuff up. But there are a lot in between who just, I don't know, maybe it's sort of true, maybe there's some truth to it. Maybe there's some, maybe we should be more concerned than we are. That kind of thinking, that waffling, indecisive thinking that is ready to believe it if you can convince them. And they're certainly trying to convince them. The administration and his supporters and his apologists and everyone else, they're trying very hard to convince those people that they're right. And we, those of us who know better, need to be trying just as hard or harder to prove them wrong. And that's partly why I come here and do this, because I know that this stuff is wrong. I know it is untrue. I know it from personal experience, from friendships that I've made, from people that I've watched, that I've worked with, that I've gotten to know or just seen around. I know what's going on with immigrants. And I know it's not any of this. And I know this stuff is dangerous and divisive. So anyway, we're getting near the end of the show here. Since we were talking about morals and ethics, it's even though those are not directly related to religion, religion bases itself very much around morals and ethics. I mean, that is their stock in trade in a sense. I mean, they really, make that the focal point of their preaching, if I can use that word. So it's important to point out where they're at and what they're thinking and doing at times like this. And so after this massacre in El Paso, as I said before, as of today, Monday, August 5th, 22 people have died. There are still more in hospital. There could be more deaths, but that's where we're standing right now. I thought I would read an article about religion and where churches are on this issue at this moment. And this is entitled, What Conservative Pastors Didn't Say After El Paso. So, crosses for each of the victims of a mass shooting in El Paso, Texas, sit before being taken to a memorial site. On Sunday morning, some of America's pastors made no mention of the horrific mass shooting in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, that killed at least 31 people and injured dozens more over the weekend. Other church leaders, however, knew they could not ignore the events. Our pulpit is not one that silence works in, says Jason Morris, the pastor at Austin New Church, a progressive Methodist congregation in Austin, Texas. My first response as a pastor was that my people are going to need words of comfort, and they're also going to need a way to channel their anger and frustration. Anger and frustration. This is what many Americans have come to feel in a culture of endless mass shootings, and it is also what some Americans have come to feel about Christianity in this country. Evidence suggests that the El Paso suspect, a 21-year-old white male, posted a manifesto online shortly before entering a Walmart and opening fire, stating that he was motivated by the, quote, Hispanic invasion of Texas. Facing this open declaration of white supremacist ideology, politicians and commentators have scorned Republicans and faith leaders who offer only thoughts and prayers in response to these events. But more than that, people have demanded accountability, calling on the church to condemn racism and bigotry. To some Americans, white Christians are partly to blame for facilitating this hate-filled political era in which Hispanic immigrants are demonized and fringe white nationalist figures have been empowered. All of this stuff has grown within the garden of people of faith, Morris told me. The truth is that we have mixed the gospel in America with some deadly toxins. Christianity in America is wildly diverse, but this question, perhaps more than any other, has become a dividing line for churches today. In the midst of rising hatred, Christians cannot agree on what their prophetic role should be, and whether there are political solutions for America's apparent recent uptick in overt violence and bigotry. Some pastors like Morris forcefully argue that America's most powerful leaders, including President Donald Trump, have to be held responsible for their rhetoric and ideas, including vilifying Hispanics and immigrants, the very people mentioned in the manifesto allegedly connected to the El Paso shooting. If you look at the current propaganda coming from Washington, you might believe that dark-skinned people, and certainly immigrants, bad hombres, are the dangerous ones, Morris said. This is not a foreigner issue. This is not an immigrant issue. This is the violence we have made a home for. But other pastors, including several influential megachurch leaders who have been strong supporters of the president, have pushed back on what they call the politicization of this and other shootings. I think it's wrong to assign blame to any party or any candidate for this problem, Robert Jeffries, the head pastor at First Baptist Church in Dallas and a member of Trump's Evangelical Advisory Council, told me. This is the problem of evil. Repeatedly throughout his candidacy and presidency, Trump has spoken about immigrants and asylum seekers, especially from Latin America, as invaders. He has also derided Mexicans as rapists and criminals, but Jeffries does not believe that the president is at all responsible for creating an atmosphere of violence. If you listen to what the president is saying, contrary to some in the mainstream media, he is not anti-immigrant. He is anti-illegal immigrant, and there is a big difference between the two, Jeffries told me. I've known the president for 4 years. He's a friend of mine. I've seen him in a number of different situations, and I've never seen one scintilla of evidence of racism in him. In his address to the nation today, Trump did take a unifying tone. The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate, the president said. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Democrats, not surprisingly, are not impressed. Over the weekend, Democratic presidential candidates repeatedly blamed Trump for savagely fraying the bonds of our nation by speaking consistently words of hatred, as Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey put it on CNN. This kind of behavior is shameful, Jeffries said. By politicizing this tragedy, some Democrats are trivializing this strategy, whatever. Another Dallas area pastor and Trump advisor, Jack Graham, agreed. I'm not going to blame rhetoric on the evil heart of some terrorist. Who knows what was going on in the mind of this shooter, he told me. He wrote a manifesto. I think we know exactly what was going on in his mind. Anyway, to me, this is not the time to go running out there and condemning political leaders, whether it's the president or anyone else, or blaming rhetoric or blaming guns. Samuel Rodriguez, an evangelical pastor who serves as the head of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, has also been one of Trump's evangelical advisors, but he told me that it is impossible to deny that anti-immigrant rhetoric stokes bigotry. I do believe words matter, he said. When we paint the immigrant community with one broad stroke, we are, in essence, feeding the poisonous venom already injected in the hearts and minds of individuals who truly do believe there is a Hispanic invasion. He called on all elected officials to disavow this kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric, but he also hopes his white Christian brothers and sisters will explicitly defend immigrants in this moment. I would like to see every white evangelical pastor in America stand up on their pulpit and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, immigrants are not a burden. Immigrants are a blessing," he said. To a certain extent, the divergence between pastors like Morris and those like Jeffries and Graham is a matter of difference over the way they think about the nature of evil. Conservative evangelicals are much more likely to point to individual sin and the persistence of evil in a fallen world than progressives, who are more inclined to explain the world in terms of systems of power. Indeed, this partially accounts for the fighting over thoughts and prayers, a phrase that seems meaningless and trite to some, but that holds real power for a pastor like Graham. Quote, "I believe that this is a spiritual matter, and that there is a devil and evil is real," he said. "Wicked Satan is a real force and power on our earth," end quote. But this divide also has important implications for how Christians think about white supremacy, and what Christians should do in the face of violence that seems to have been motivated by racist ideology. Graham and Jeffries both condemned white supremacy. White supremacy and all the rest is evil and wicked and should be condemned without hesitation, Graham told me. Jeffries added that it's important for churches to acknowledge the mistakes they have made in the past. His congregation in Dallas, for example, was long segregated. Shootings like this offer a chance to denounce racism in every form to our people and to Christians, Jeffries said. Racism has no place in our church. If you hate people according to their skin color, you're not welcome in First Baptist Church in Dallas. It's not so simple. Anyway, but these pastors, like many other white Christians in the United States, do not believe there is a connection between white supremacist violence and their votes to make America great again. I am not a fool. I know my conservative friends are not in favor of mass shootings, Morris said. However, it's not hard to see how white supremacy and Make America Great Again come from the same side of the mouth. This slogan, Morris said, is a dog whistle to conservatives who want to roll the clock back to a more unequal time, when white men led our pulpits. Conservatives may very well reject violence, but defending this kind of viewpoint is patently contradictory to people who aren't drinking that Kool-Aid, he said. The drumbeat of condemnation within Christianity seems to be growing louder. El Paso, a predominantly Catholic city, filled its churches with mourners and prayer on Sunday. Some prominent Catholic leaders, including Cardinal Blase Kupich of Chicago, called out America's political atmosphere as an exacerbating factor for the shooting. Quote, "We also need to hold accountable those in society, including some leaders, who fuel these violent acts by dividing humanity through hateful rhetoric," Kupich said in a statement. "This must stop. along with the silence of our elected officials who have failed to condemn hate speech, for they are the very ones who have sworn to keep our nation safe. No matter how secular it has putatively become, America still looks to its churches for leadership in times of darkness. And that, perhaps, is why some Americans feel so much rage at what they see as the moral failings of some in the church. The religious right sold their soul and gave silence to pay for a place at the table of power. And what that means is they can't blow the prophetic whistle, Morris told me. We've lost our way. So, I only have a couple minutes left. I can't get into this, devils and all that stuff. I am not a religious person. I do not believe in any of this stuff. But it is clear, to me anyway, that if religion is based on a belief in right and wrong, good and evil, that there are or must be things that can be clearly described as good or as evil. And if you have that in mind, if you're walking around with those kinds of black and white, yes and no, this or that sort of things in your head, it must be part and parcel of that. To me, it would seem a process. There must be a process involved in that where you weigh everything based on how it relates to those beliefs. And for Jeffries, for example, to say racism has no place in our church, and then earlier on say that he's been around Trump and all these situations and there's not a scintilla of racism in him, that's so obviously not true. You don't have to believe the fake news media. You don't have to believe anything. You only have to look at what Trump does and what he says. That's all you have to look at. Just actual recordings of him speaking. Listen to them. Listen to his words. Read his stupid Twitter things. And you know that he espouses racist beliefs. Whether he is a racist himself or not, who can say? But he's using that. He's using racism as a tool. And if you're willing to do it, if you're willing to use it, if you're willing to stand by and let it happen and provide tacit support for it, in my book, there's no difference between you and the person who believes it full on. If you're willing to accept the fact that this person is going to murder in your name and do nothing about it, except every now and then go, oh, that's just terrible. They shouldn't do that. I strongly condemn it. And then go back to doing the exact same things that led to it in the first place. You are as bad as that person. And that's my belief. So again, I'm not a religious person. I'm not going to pretend to weigh in on religious questions of religion, but I will say that if religion doesn't stand for something, does not posit good, and does not stand for good, then what is it for? I don't even know. So anyway, I've used up all my time. It is I must go, but you have been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM, and I hope you will join us again sometime. And until then, we'll see you later.